Hi again, it's Kate from the Traverse Area District Library, and this is lesson 3 in the Learn to Knit series, sponsored by TADL. In the first lesson, we learned to see what knitting and purling looks like and what different stitches look like and how to make the fabric. And in the second lesson, we learned how to cast on. And in this third lesson, you will learn how to actually make a knit stitch. You can look forward to also learning how to purl and how to fix mistakes. So here we go. I will share my screen with you here. Just a second, please. And, I wanted to mention, if you're right-handed or left-handed, I would urge you to learn the right-handed way of knitting. The reason that is going to be easier for you in the long run, I believe, is because if you learn left-handed knitting, you will have to transpose your patterns to match the left-handed way of knitting. So in the long run, I think you'll be happy that, that you learned to do it this way. And I have taught many people to knit at the library, and several of them have been lefties, and they have been absolutely successful. So on the needle, I have cast on 6 stitches. You always start knitting with your stitches, the needle full of your stitches on the left hand, and you have an empty needle on the right hand. You have a tail, which is, the very end of your yarn, and then you have the working yarn. The working yarn is the one that's attached to the ball of yarn that you have. So this is going to be important to remember. When you knit, the yarn stays to the back, and when you purl, that's the other stitch you'll learn, the yarn stays to the front. Now, this isn't going to be super significant for you right now, but just try to put that in your memory bank for later. Okay, I'm going to call this empty needle the working needle, and this is your working yarn that has the ball attached to it. The working needle goes into each loop that is on your needle that needs to be knit. So these are my casted on stitches or cast on stitches, and what you want to do is go right inside the one loop that is on that needle and push it in. And you don't want to push it in just to this distance, because the size of the needle is, needles come in all different sizes. And as you can see, this is tapered to the end so that you can actually dig into that stitch. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this needle, and we're trying to measure to the size of this knitting needle, which is a size 7. And if I were to wrap right at the tip of it, it would probably measure to like about a size 2, which is a pretty thin needle. So go ahead and shove your working needle into the loop on that first stitch. And as you can see, it makes a bit of a crisscross. I know that it's lost a little bit of focus here. Okay, so you have a crisscross shape. And the working needle is behind the needle full of stitches. Your working yarn is back here in the back. You're going to wrap the working needle counterclockwise. You're going to take your index finger and work the working needle down, down, down. And I'm going to tip this a little so you can see that I'm going to just pounce under that little loop and push it back onto the needle. And then this is the old stitch, so we're going to say goodbye to that one and pop it off. I'll show you again. It pushes into the stitch that's at the top of the left needle. You take your yarn, which is, it's naturally falling to the back, and that will be important in your next lesson when you learn to purl. And you pull this yarn around the more empty needle, the needle on the right, the one in the back. And you're going to just kind of dip down, down, down until you are able to catch that wrapping that you made onto the needle and push the old one off. Some people use a little rhyme. I didn't ever do that, but I'll try it. Jack runs in and around the tree, under the bridge, and pops off for me. Something like that. You can make up your own rhyme. But Jack runs in around the tree, under the bridge, and pops off for me. I like to hold this working yarn in my pinky. This will give you a nice tension, and that will help you make consistency with your stitches. So as you can see, this stays pretty taut. It's not tight like this, but it's taut. So again, the first, pardon me, I'll interrupt myself. The first row can be a little bit challenging if you have cast it on very tightly. So I always encourage people to try to learn to cast on pretty loosely. Otherwise, this is really difficult to get your needle in here, but you're going to crisscross to the back. So in, around, down, under, and off. Again, this is our last one. This is called a row, so I'm almost done with a row. In, around, down, under, through that loop. It goes right through that same loop and pops off. When you have completed a row, then you switch hands. And when you switch hands, you're going to naturally turn the stitches to the other side of the fabric. So I'll show you that again. We finished, this was the last one, it popped off. Now I'm sitting here. Now, the stitches that need to be knitted should go into the left hand. So instead of just taking it straight over here, this would be difficult because your fabric would build and build and build, but it would go into your hand and it would have no place to go. So you just have to do a little turn like this. So it goes so that your yarn is building between your two needles here. Now, people never really like this first stitch. I don't know. It's a little floppier than the rest of them. And new knitters in particular say, oh, this is so big and not tidy. I need to tighten it up. No, don't pull it. It's not going to tighten for you. Just roll with it because it will tighten up in its next row. But one mistake that new knitters do is instead of grabbing the stitch that's right on the needle and going behind like that, this is the proper way to do it. Some new knitters accidentally put their yarn over here, and I'll show you what happens. One stitch, if you put your yarn over here, accidentally becomes two stitches that you'd like to try to knit, and that's not right. So your yarn hangs to the middle, your stitches hang to the middle of your two needles. So I will show you another row. In, I like to pick that up with my pinky so I have a correct tension, and that will be important. Don't drop your yarn every time. If you drop your yarn every time, sometimes you're going to have a really loose one, and sometimes you're going to have a really tight stitch. So we want to try to have consistency, and this tries to give some consistency by keeping it taut all the time. Around. I'm going to turn that so you can see it coming under and through that same loop. Push it onto that needle, and then that one is a bye-bye. That one pops off. Okay? No, don't stop and tighten this. Don't do that, because I know you're doing it. especially if you're brand new. Just in, around, underneath and through, and pop it off. Boom. Don't stop and tighten. Go delving right back into the next stitch. If you stop and tighten, your work will be very uneven looking, and plus you'll be really slow. So around, under, and off. Now you can see some fabric is starting to build here. Jack runs in, around the tree, under the bridge, and off for me. Jack runs in, around the tree, under the bridge. There it's coming under the bridge and off for me. Okay, I'm going to show you how to transfer hands one last time. Then if you practice this again and again, you'll start to have a little bit of fabric growing down this way. Transfer hands. When we transfer hands, we do a flip like that. This is not the loop you are concerned with. Do not accidentally knit 2 stitches. Push that guy aside until you find the stitch that touches the needle. Shove your working yarn in, measure and wrap to the right size of your knitting needle. Again, not to the tip of your needle. You do have to come back up to the tip, but this is after you have already measured the wraparound. So you measure the wraparound, and then this index finger kind of pushes down to help get it under that loop, and then it can pop off. This will be the last row that I show you. And I hope that you are able to practice this a little bit and have, like I said, a great distraction from this quarantine at home. I can't wait to see you, all of you patrons that I've been missing so much. I'm so used to seeing my regulars come in, and just know that all of my colleagues and I miss you very much, and we cannot wait till the library can open again. It's the first thing we want to have happen, believe us. We don't like this any more than you. Around, under, and off. Okay, so when you knit every single row, as I've been doing every single row, you'll get a fabric that looks like bumps on the front and bumps on the back. This is called garter stitch. Lots of scarves are made like this. If you would like a project, you could cast on maybe like, I don't know, 30 or 40 stitches. This is only 6. It depends on how wide you'd like your scarf. On a size, whatever needle you have, between a 7 and an 11, I guess, would be kind of fun for a scarf. And the bigger the needle, the kind of faster you make fabric, because the loops are larger. So you'll get a product a lot sooner if you use a bigger needle. So cast on 40 and just knit a row, knit a row, knit a row, and you'll get a scarf that looks bumpy on both sides. If you yank this open a little bit, you can actually see the knit stitch is like a V-neck. And on the back of that, we'll call it a V-neck, like a shirt. And on the back, right up against the needle, opposite of a knit stitch is a purl. They are opposite from each other. Pearls have these little bumps or little turtlenecks. So in this lesson, you learn to just make garter stitch or, garter stitch fabric. And in the next lesson, you'll be able to make stockinette stitch, which keeps all of the smooths together on the front and all of the bumpy stitches together on the back. And so I hope that gave you a little inspiration to try your hand at knitting, and I look forward to seeing you again for the purling lesson. Bye.